Reports all around the world suggesting that Ten Hag will be sacked after the FA Cup final tomorrow, regardless of the result. Deja vu, says the front page of the Dutch sports newspaper, because of course Van Gaal won the FA Cup and was sacked 2 days later at Manchester United. For more on this, Kieran is with us, as is Frank Leboeuf. We'll kick things off in the studio, Craig.
Must be a Dutch thing.
That's it. Blame the Dutch.
They just hate the Dutch people at Manchester.
That's it. Blame it all on the Dutch.
I don't think, for anybody that was out there thinking that supports Man United, and I don't know if there's anybody that was thinking along these lines of what if they win this game and will he save his job? But there's a real long game to this, isn't there? Rather than, think back to Roberto Mancini beating Man City in 2013 and Wigan got relegated. There's a bigger picture here, and that is it's just not been good enough. The other side of it is, should they have addressed this a long time ago and not have it leaking out, a couple of days before a cup final? Yeah. But they were probably thinking, we'll try and keep it hush-hush and we'll wait till everything's over and then we'll announce it. But like everything else at most clubs, and especially Man United in the last few years, they leak like a sieve. They can't keep anything. So it's a shame in somewhat that he's having to go into this game facing all these questions, but I think he already knows his fate. And United need to move on, but quite frankly, I think his time is up there, unfortunately.
Are you wearing orange as a tribute to him today?
Yeah, well, that's
I
feel bad for
very
him.
Fitting.
I feel bad for him.
Do you think he knew already?
He has to know, although he officially hasn't been told by MD. Because he's walking around the corridors, and people are walking past him and giving it one of them not to look at him. I mean, it's not a surprise. It surely shouldn't be a secret. And they should have done that. They should have. The best thing for the team would have been if they'd turned around on Monday morning and said, "Look, Erik Ten Hag's not going to be here. We wish him all the best for the final." And everybody, they might have just taken the air out of the situation. Maybe everybody would relax a little bit and go and try and do what they've got to do in the cup final. Instead of waiting for a couple of days, as Craig said, it leaks out, big surprise. But it's the right decision, if indeed that is it, which it will be, because there absolutely no reason whatsoever why anybody should keep Ten Hag at Man United.
He gave a speech, didn't he, in his last home game, after the game, which I think was a little surprising to see him do that. But looking at it at the time, I think most people were thinking he knows what's happening, and so he's addressing the home crowd and thanking them for the support.
Kieran, how does this affect the players, if at all, going into tomorrow's game?
I actually think it removes the pressure in a way. I think it takes the attention away from the players more. Before it was that Ten Hag's job was dependent on the players' performance or result, whereas now, that's not the case. The writing's on the wall and the players can just, go out there and focus on the game and themselves and play more free. As for Ten Hag, ultimately, it is a tough one. I don't think he's been given the chance to show what he's really capable of. He's had so much off the field problems to deal with. He never really got time to play a full strength team or connect with the fans. He's been picking up the pieces since he got there, really. So it's hard to judge his tenure there.
By the way, that's not a green screen behind Nedum. He's genuinely standing outside Wembley at, 10:30 on a Friday night. What a treat for him. How do you think the fans will receive this news, Nedum?
I think it'll be mixed, to be honest. I think the point that Craig was making about the fact that it's leaked, that will feel like a sort of sense of embarrassment as such. But then there are tons of United fans who would be happy to see him leave. But again, that sense of embarrassment in terms of this coming out the day before, the cup final against your big rivals from the same city, I think it is a bit of a funny situation to be in. And I think if I could piggyback on what we were just saying then from Kieran, I think Craig mentioned earlier in the show about how Man City had a similar situation with Mancini in 2013 or 14 against Wigan. And I think that day, what's different compared to today is the fact that United in this game are underdogs. So I think at times the fact that the manager is going to be on his way out, it feels to me like maybe some of the players will be more comfortable with that. And so they do arrive in the game tomorrow with no expectations upon them. And there will be a great sense of freedom, I believe. It's not to say that that's essentially what they need to perform better as such. But I think for some, I think that weight might be lifted off their shoulders. And I know it feels very, very toxic from that standpoint. But I think when some players do not necessarily turn against the manager in a really open way, but when they lose belief in their manager, then I think it's a sense of change that needs to come. But to go back to your original question, I think the fans in some ways will be embarrassed. I think I'll be interested to see how they sort of show their support to him during the game, how they'll perceive his changes, how they'll sort of praise him at the end, whether he's won or he's lost. Because if it is the last moment for him, you know, he has actually brought them a trophy, which is something that many people thought that they wouldn't be able to do.
Frank, if you're sitting in that dressing room, what difference does this make to you as a player?
It depends. What was your relationship with Ten Hag? I mean, if you are a young player and you were playing, you know, you could be a little bit sad about it. But otherwise, you know, all the players would be kind of relieved that he has to go because it didn't work. We have to be clear about that. And you are a new player, you feel that maybe he's a good coach, but it doesn't work. The chemistry doesn't work. And we're not talking about young players like you can find at Chelsea where you have to build something, to create something and create the experience. The list of players that you have at Manchester United are made, for most of them, from experienced players who are already international players and they know exactly what to do. It's just that they didn't connect. So the main reason has to be the coach. So I think most players were going to be relieved in a way that they're going to find somebody else who maybe going to find the right button where he can press on and suddenly it works for most of players to play all together. That's what everybody wants to find. And I think also for the fans, they're going to be relieved because they want to see something else. It's about time to see Manchester coming back to their best. But players-wise, really, it doesn't really matter in a way. But for most of them, I think they are relieved that Ten Hag has to go.
I don't quite see how. I mean, you could probably go through this whole United squad in one hand and pick out the players that we perceived would run through the proverbial wall for their manager. Most of them are looking after their own backsides. They are, and that's been part of the problem, as well as the injuries. So I don't quite see how this news is going to make much of a difference. They're just going to, somebody else is going to come in and although he's been far from perfect, until they get rid of some of these players, they're going to have similar issues, albeit they should, you know, he should have been doing better with what he had. Going back to Kieran's point about not having the players at all times to work with and the injuries, and they have had a lot of injuries. But again, you could count on one hand probably the games where they've all stood up. Most of them, and we've talked about this. We've talked about this endlessly, that it's been the games against the weaker teams in the Premier League in particular that he's been outplayed, that they've looked more comfortable, they've created more chances, a lot of these teams, they've dominated even at Old Trafford. And that's before you get to the FA Cup semi-final, where you have a Man United team with 11 internationals, they're 3-0 up and they get battered from the 50, 55-minute mark onwards. Absolutely battered to a point where they're clinging on after 120 minutes and it goes to penalties. And I think when ownership and investors have looked at that and said, you know, we have got problems, but shouldn't we be better on the field than Bournemouth at home and Brentford, who absolutely cattled Man United? OK, they got a draw. And then Ten Hag comes out and says, well, Man City struggled here. They didn't. It's just too much nonsense. Man City did not struggle at Brentford. Phil Foden scored a hat-trick. It was a cakewalk. And so there's been too many anomalies from the playing, from the decision-making, to the style of play, to how they've been dominated by other teams, to his rhetoric. When you put all that together, Stevie, he had no chance.
And the biggest one is the one that was brought up about injuries. Regardless of, nobody can argue they've had injuries. But when on paper you look at the teams that they've put out, they've got talent. So the coach's job is to mould that talent together and figure out how it works. From the first game of the season to now, he hasn't been able to do that. He's had a whole season to figure that out, and he has not been able to do it. And that's his job. His job's not to be an ambassador for the club or to talk nicely or to get all the fans on his side. His job is to coach the team. That's why he's called a coach. And he hasn't done it. And that's why he's going to lose his job.
Nedum, who do the fans want to replace him?
Do you think I've been going around asking United fans what they think about things?
Well,
not really.
I feel like you're our man on the ground out there, Nedum.
Yeah, not on that bit of ground. But I think from the limited few that I've spoken to, I think the talk was Pochettino since he's available. I think the talk was that he wanted him quite a few years ago when he was just first leaving Spurs, I believe. So I guess that would be something from that standpoint that is exciting to them. Obviously, we've heard discussions about Southgate and so many people being turned off by that idea for different reasons according to their perspective. But I think the fact that Pochettino's available, I'd imagine quite a few of them would be very keen to bring him to the north rather.
Yeah, it's like a no-brainer, isn't it, Frank? You look at that list, Pochettino, of course, Premier League experience. Mckenna, I understand, his link with Manchester United. Tuchel just coming off what happened at Bayern. Poch just seems like a layup.
Yeah, and I think it should be the right decision for Manchester United because he proved again with Spurs how he can handle. He proved with Chelsea. We can say that it wasn't a great season, but he ended up finishing 6th and being qualified for the Europa League where nobody expected it. And with a more experienced team, I think he can achieve something. He knows how psychologically work with experienced players and. I'm pretty sure he's going to be up for the job and do better than anybody else. I have question marks about Tuchel. I mean, we saw how unstable he made the Bayern Munich dressing room with some experienced players like Kimmich, for example, like Müller. I don't know how it's going to work with Casemiro as well, with maybe Fernandes, Maguire. So I think Pochettino can be closer to the players, more attentive to them. So I think it can be the right choice.
Kieran Mckenna's an interesting one.
Yeah, so he's obviously got 2 back-to-back promotions with Ipswich. He's got links with Manchester United.
He's been linked with Chelsea as well. He's in a very dangerous situation here. I don't think he's ready for either of those.
Right. Brighton is another one he's been linked to.
Listen, that's still a tough act to follow, Potter and De Zerbi, and they'll sell players. Yeah, they've recruited well, but they'll sell. Look, he's back-to-back promotions. He was at United before, along with Solskjaer, So he was involved in the tactics before, because we know Solskjaer really wasn't. And getting players at Ipswich to listen to your methods, and his methods apparently are a little different, and he does things in training that are a little bit thinking outside the box, and that's fine. And Ipswich players have taken that on board, but going to a big club with some of these so-called superstars and asking them to do the same thing, that's difficult. So I think he's in a difficult position if he jumps at one of these jobs, because his stock is really high. If he goes at Premier League with Ipswich, they get relegated.
He'll go to Bayern.
So what? He'll go to Bayern. But, I personally
that
don't
would
think...
be a real gamble,
I don't think he's ready for
a real gamble.
Who would you have, Stevie, from that list?
I would have Pochettino.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think twice about it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Manchester United are actually in a real mess. And so do you go for Mckenna and you don't know what you're getting, or do you go with... And to say a safe pair of hands is disrespecting Pochettino, to be honest. Or do you go with a guy who you know has ability, who knows his way around the team, he knows his way around players, he understands how big a job this is? Anybody else, particularly on that list, seems like a gamble.
Yeah. Kieran?
Does he want the job?
Sorry.
Why wouldn't he
I
want
would
it?
imagine
I think he'd want it.
Well, maybe if you've had a long time out of football, and you think, I need to get back in. But how many shambles does he want to walk in and out of? I mean, PSG was a bit of a mess. It was a circus. And it didn't go too well from there. He's gone in at Chelsea. He saw the big picture at Chelsea. He had plenty of time to think about it. But he's gone in there. It's probably worse than he thought. And now he's left there, whatever way you want to call it, sacked or mutual consent.
Craig.
Well, he goes to Man United. Yes, they have this 1.25 billion Ineos investment, and they're going to fix the roof, and they're going to fix the training ground, and they're going to bring Dan Ashworth in, and all this. But is Pochettino ready to walk into another mess and really, really, really put his stock back on the line again? That's a difficult one.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, but the thing is, when you are Pochettino and the standard of Pochettino, you're not going to find a club where everything works perfectly when the coach leaves to leave you the space. You're always going to go for a club who has problems. It's why they sacked the former coach. And you're going to step up, and you're going to face problem. That's the thing. That's your life. And everybody's facing that. You know, I'm sure Ancelotti, when he came to Real Madrid or before when he came to PSG, it wasn't a clean way. He had to sort every problems out, and that's going to happen to Pochettino every time he goes somewhere else. And that's what it is for PSG, Chelsea, and maybe for Manchester United.